Valencia destituye al técnico Albert Celades. En un comunicado, el club ha agradecido a Celades todo su trabajo y dedicación y le desea éxito de cara al futuro.
When Albert Celades was sacked at the end of June, everyone thought it was just another chapter in the story of Peter Lim's ownership of Valencia. However, over in Singapore, Lim's daughter Kim fired up her Instagram and began typing.
Some Valencia fans are cursing and scolding at my family and I. Don't they get it? The club is ours and we can do anything we want with it. Deal with it.
Since Peter Lim took over the club, the ups and downs have been vertiginous. But things seem to have reached a new low at the Mestalla. With rumours that a large number of the squad could be sold off in a summer fire sale, we ask, is Valencia a club in crisis? Is Valencia a club in crisis right now?
Yes, but that's sort of like a yearly tradition, like the Las Fallas festival in Valencia, which is held annually in March each year, where they put up a lot of paper-mache dolls worth a lot of money and then they burn it all in one night, and then start from scratch.
Pål Ødegård is a Norwegian journalist whose work on football politics can be found in Josimar.
Even before Peter Lim took over, we have been used to a regular crisis, sporting or financial, or both, at the club.
So on the 2nd of July, Kim Lim, the daughter of the Valencia owner Peter Lim, put out a message on Instagram which read, "Some Valencia fans are criticising and cursing my family. Don't they understand? The club is ours and we can do whatever we want with it, and nobody can tell us anything." Could you give us a little bit of the context behind this message?
During this 9 years that Peter Lim has owned the club, you can recognize the pattern now, because of the great turnover of coaches especially. But it usually goes like this, that Peter Lim puts his man, advised most likely by Jorge Mendes, the super agent, which they have a very close relation with, puts in an experienced coach. The greatest example was with Gary Neville, which went disastrously. And then he has to do a sporting decision where they hire a more experienced coach, which improve results, make the players believe in themselves. The daily running is one of the biggest disputes right now. That comes across with Peter Lim's, or rather President Anil Murphy's, control over the club, simply because he comes across as very arrogant.
So the sacking of Albert Celades proved to be a touch paper then, igniting a lot of the old disputes about Peter Lim's ownership of Valencia, which in turn provoked his daughter.
Yes, Kim's reaction was an Instagram post, which basically said, "It's our club, we bought it, we can do whatever we want with it." And then she later deleted the post, but the damage was already done.
And how did the fans respond to that?
They reacted quite strongly on social media, which is almost their only outlet to let out their opinions these days because of coronavirus and no people in the stadium. There was an interview in the Singaporean newspaper where Kim's brother Kiat was interviewed, and he explained that this had more to do with the racist comments to Kim Lim's post, which of course I believe that many comments were probably very racist against those with Chinese descent, as Peter Lim and his family is. But the message also came across a bit like in a siege mentality, like no, you are the bad ones, while not really listening to why the fans are angry.
Former Manchester United defender Gary Neville has been sacked as manager of Valencia after 4 months in charge. Neville took the reins in December and guided the team to 10 wins in 28 matches.
You've already mentioned that one of the issues of the Lim tenure has been the high turnover of managers. Back in 2014, when Lim took over, Juan Antonio Pizzi was the manager. He was replaced for the beginning of the new season by Nuno Espirito Santo. Then you've had Salvador González Marco, or Vorro, as his nickname is, and he has come in regularly and filled in between other managers. We've had Gary Neville, we've had Paco Ayestarian, we've had Cesare Prandelli, we've had Marcelino, and most recently Albert Celades. Why do you think that the Lims are so keen to turn over their managers so quickly?
If you put like sporting results in one axis, which is what fans care about, really, and control, that is Peter Lim and President Alan Murphy's control on the other axis, it gives you a very good picture. If you start with Pizzi, he was hired by Amadeo Salvo, who was president before Peter Lim took over the club in earnest. Amadeo Salvo was the one who brought Peter Lim's offer and fronted it, and he did a very good job. It's not unnatural that when a new ownership comes in that the managerial team has to go. Then he hired like Jorge Mendes' first client and great friend Nuno Espirito Santo. It was a mixed experience. Espirito Santo, he did a pretty good job in general. But then he was removed. There was discontent among fans because of results, but it wasn't really that critical. So this was probably more some agent backroom dealing to send him to the Premier League. Then, of course, you mentioned Voro, the former player that is a caretaker manager. He's sort of like a cult figure in that position, as he has one of the best points record when he run the club. But of course, he's only there until he can be replaced. Then it's either like one of his friends, like Gary Neville. Paco Ayestaran can't be considered a yes man. This was a guy desperate for a job, big club. It didn't go well, but he was basically one who did everything the board told him to do, even in taking out the team and so on. Prandelli was not a yes man, and that ended even before it started, because Prandelli resigned his position practically at the start of the season, simply because Peter Lim didn't hold his promises for getting certain players and get rid of others. And then we get to Marcelino, which managed to win the Copa del Rey with Valencia, their first title in over 10 years. And he was also not a yes man, and this is what brings us to the current situation. While Celades now has been fired over poor results, but he was certainly a yes man.
Marcelino's departure in particular seems confusing. As you've mentioned, they won the Copa del Rey under him, and they seem to have arrived at some level of stability. Was it simply that he wasn't a yes man that he was let go then?
That is exactly correct, because what many fans outside Valencia forums aren't aware of is that Valencia won the Copa del Rey against the board's order, because they were more preoccupied of securing the Champions League spot and all the money that came with it than actually winning the title. So in a way, they had given Marcelino an order to spend your best players in the remaining league matches, so we get a direct spot to the Champions League. And then we don't care too much a Copa del Rey final, because if they're tired, we probably lose against Barcelona anyway. Now, the players and the coach, they struggled in the first half of the season. Then they had gained quite a momentum during the spring, and they were very high in spirit. This was also the centenary of Valencia last year. So the atmosphere was incredible when they won the cup. And the thing is, that they actually did this against Peter Lim's and President Alan Murphy's wishes. And hence Marcelino was sacked. Then the sporting director, Matteo Alemani, who had done a very good job, he also left because he felt, of course, his job was redundant because he had no real decision power. Because he often didn't know what was going on. If he could never answer the press, because if he think they had a plan, then there would come a counter message from Singapore.
With the most recent manager being relieved of his duties being Albert Celades, who you've said was already a sort of company man, Sid Lowe's described him as a Meriton company man. Meriton Holdings is the company that Peter Lim owns. Does his sacking suggest that the owner has run out of ideas, or is it just simply going to be a case that he's going to bring in another person who can do his bidding?
I'd rather put it like, if you take Peter Lim in particular, he has some interest in football, but he's more into watching Manchester United hang out with the class of 96. He's also have a 40% stake in Salford City Football Club, which is co-owned by Scholes, the Neville brothers, amongst others. I think even Jorge Mendes has a stake in it. But Valencia Club de Football, he has been twice to watch a match, and he basically don't pay much attention. Of course, he's a businessman. He defends this, like he has to run his businesses. He's not that keen to fly a lot. But it's quite obvious he does not really care about Valencia Club de Football as such. If it is that they win the league or the Champions League or something like that, he's rather interested in the money it can generate. Then again, I also believe, like I already mentioned, like if he has trouble controlling a coach, he will simply remove him and put someone more gullible in his position, which, for example, Ayestaran and Celades are good examples of. These are coaches maybe not like they're robots and do everything they say, but they're more like they are inexperienced. They wanted to use a big club to get a name, and then of course they are not the first one to protest.
So let's talk a little bit about Valencia before the Lim takeover. What was it like before Peter Lim took over at the club?
This is quite important because it goes a long way to explain why Valencia fans have in a way been so patient. In the national sports papers in Spain, they often joke about Valencian fans being too emotional, complain too early. But in 2007, the club was owned by the son of a real estate magnate, someone called Juan Carlos Soler. And of course, the course of the market crash, because a few years earlier the club had been forced to go on the stock exchange. This became like an engine to spend a lot of borrowed money. And then with the financial crash, suddenly the club was bankrupt. They had already started a huge project to build a new 75,000-seater stadium. And one day the construction company simply left the place because the bills weren't paid. This ended up with a long debacle with finding some owner to buy them out of this mess. One came up, a person called Vicente Soriano, who had been in the board earlier, I think. But he came with an offer, but it turned out to be completely fake. It was an investor company, but when fans started checking out this, they couldn't find a web page. After a day, when they complained, a webpage came up, but then they saw that the logo of the company was actually taken from a coloring book for kids, and this scam was exposed. Subsequently, this is on the site, but the former Juan Carlos Soler, he actually hired an ex-mercenary soldier to kidnap the other president, and this is still running in Valencian courts. But that's Spanish football president for you. After that, the club were in huge financial crisis. In their wardrobes, they didn't have hot water, they didn't have light bulbs. The few staff that were left, they had to do a lot of tasks that they weren't competent for. And the club was run by Manuel Llorente, which is a bankman. And his job was to try to find some way out of an agreement with the bank to get some time, or the best, a buyer. This dragged on. Valencia's sporting results were quite good in a period, under Unai Emery as a coach. And they qualified repeatedly for the Champions League. But this wasn't enough to sell their debt, and they had to sell away the best stars each season. And then finally some offers came on the table, and two of them, one an American, the other presumably Russian consortium. They both turned out to be fake. But many also had reservations against Meriton's offer, simply because what were his motives? Did he really care about the club? What was he going to do with it? Would he finish the new stadium, which is really the clue for Valencia to get good finances? After Lim bought the club, while this was formalized, which took a few months, Amadeo Salvo, popular figure, he has run the company that sponsored the city's basketball team. Right now he's running Unión Deportiva Ibiza, which is trying to climb up to the second division in Spain. But during his short year at the club, he managed to get a little bit of borrowed money, and he professionalized the club. The club during Llorente had been really run down, but Salvo managed to professionalize it in any way. Even in marketing, the club was really on its knees. But then he had to go as Peter Lim took over in earnest, and since then it has been this roller coaster ride.
The financial stability of the club is very, very clear. I think this is our biggest achievement. We have stabilized the banks, all the creditors, and the cash flow position of the club.
Have the Lims improved the financial side of things since they've been in?
In reality, they're not really improved much. What might have improved is the value of the squad. Then they are qualifying less to Champions League than they did before Peter Lim took over, or less frequently. In the last 25 years, I don't remember the exact figure now. But it's like a much higher proportion the last 25, 30 years where Valencia haven't qualified for Europe has been during Peter Lim's presidency or ownership. The big clue is Valencia have a very old stadium. It's Primera's oldest by far. It's from 1923. It has been refurnished for the 82 World Cup, for example, but it is starting to become a liability because the foundation is rotting up. The new stadium, which was started in 2007, stopped building a year later, and it's still there. It is sort of half-built. It's like a skeleton. And this has now been standing idle for so long that they probably have to tear the whole thing down and start over again. Mark Fenwick, the famous stadium designer, he has even downscaled the project, so with less seats, no underground parking, to make it easier to build and cheaper. But as more and more people here in Valencia are suspecting, Peter Lim doesn't really intend to finish this stadium. In any case, this depends on selling the old one, or rather the land where the old one is, because it's good real estate property, quite central. And this paperwork has more or less been done, but now the city council is starting to get impatient with Peter Lim, or Meriton Holding, that they are trying to delay the process. The stadium was first promised to be finished by 2019, which was last year and their centenary, but there still hasn't come anyone to start up the building again yet. If you ask my opinion, I don't believe Peter Lim will finish or even start completing the new stadium.
How would you say that the fans have responded in general to the Lim ownership?
It has been quite mixed. There was a group quite critical in the beginning. Most people sat on the fence waiting to see, like, okay, a bit like at many other clubs with foreign owners, like, okay, if we get the results, put in money and we get good players and we win titles, why not? But of course, with this constant circus around the club, if it goes well, it sort of disintegrates quite rapidly. And I think fans are very frustrated, most of all because of the arrogance. During Peter Lim's reign, they are now the third president, and this one is exceptionally unpopular with the fans. The attitude as well of club president Alan Murphy has been very incendiary among fans the last couple of years. Then again, as in other big clubs, Valencia fans is a diverse group. The Ultras has had long-standing issues with the Valencia management, but they can also blame themselves a bit because they have had right-wing elements. They have not been disciplined in all situations. Like, for example, they almost lynched Gary Neville at the training facilities during his time. Their problem now is that they can't go to the stadium. The classic Spanish reaction when they're discontent with the leadership is to wave white handkerchiefs and whistle and boo until they point at the president and shout in unison, Peter Lim, go home. So this they can't do now. So what happened in the last league match, of course some fans were still outside the stadium, even if they didn't go in. Often when the players come out of the stadium, going to the car, some fans stop and take some selfies with them. So some had come with a Peter Lim Go Home t-shirt and took a selfie with Rodrigo Moreno, which was instantly spread over social media. Also some advertisements around the stadium with posters playing on a famous book and movie. You have like Meriton Holdings, Lost in Management. So fans try to protest in their way, but it won't really have a big effect, I think, until they are back in the stadium.
There's been a lot of rumours at the moment that lots of the squad members are going to be sold off in the next few months. Ferran Torres, the youngster, is being eyed up by a lot of big clubs. Midfield legend Dani Parejo has been put on the transfer market. Does this signify that the club and the owners are looking for a reset next season, do you think?
Yes, I would wait and see a little bit. First of all, there are a lot of rumours out there that are yet to be verified, including this one. But I believe that, first of all, this was told to the players in the dressing room before their match against Real Valladolid, which was their penultimate match. And their club legend and captain, Dani Parejo, for example, was told, no, we don't need you next season. But they especially mentioned the leaders in the team, François Coquelin, Dogbia, Dani Parejo. Especially those, they are not that young anymore and they are strong characters in the dressing room. And I think they have tried to make Peter Lim and President Alan Murphy change their mind about Marcelino, about Celades' style, several things. and this is why they are now told to leave. So maybe this was a heat-in-the-moment decision. Dani Parejo has today told a Spanish radio station that he intends to stay his last year of his contract at the club. If a club, as another rumor said, they can sell him for less than 10 million euros, the club that gets him for that are indeed very lucky. But I will wait and see a little bit to see what is done in effect and what is practically doable. Because one thing is to tell a player to leave, another one is for the player to agree on the contract and someone else to buy him. But all this plays into Jorge Mendes' hands, of course.
In terms of the managership, do you think a new manager will be installed over the summer, and do you have any idea of who it will be?
Lots of names have been mentioned. Last night, Javi Gracia was like the hottest candidate. But what Peter Lim really thinks is a different matter altogether. And some rumor that Jardim might be the next one, as he's a big Jorge Mendes client. There was even a rumor that Jorge Mendes had carte blanche to put both the coach and redesign the squad. So to believe the rumors, anything can happen.
So Valencia finished 9th this season, just gone. Where do you think that they should be finishing in the table with the squad and the resources they have?
I think if they had kept Alemany as a sporting manager, kept Marcelino, even if they just changed them but had a good replacement and a good sporting plan, they would be at the level of Sevilla, in my opinion. I can't see that Valencia's squad is inferior to Sevilla's.
So what does the future look like for Valencia, do you think?
Well, it's anyone's guess, as no one knows who will coach Valencia next season, who will play for Valencia next season, whether the president will keep making strange decisions. Depends when they hire a new coach as well. They have to do preseason and they hire the coach right before the season starts. That is usually not good. So again, it's anyone's guess really. But I believe we probably see this repeat itself. Now he needs to hire someone to convince the fans, someone experienced. That experience will in the beginning probably listen, then spend maybe 1-2 seasons to build up a squad, confidence, interactions, etc. to be able to compete at a high level. And when it happens, maybe that coach as well will start to, hey, let me do my job. And if you say that too loud, he will be removed and be replaced with a yes man. And history will repeat itself as a farce.
Pål Ødegård is a Norwegian journalist whose work on football politics can be found on Josimar. This episode was produced by Josh Schneiderweiler. I'm John Mackenzie. Thanks for listening to Football Today. If you enjoy this podcast, why not subscribe to our Patreon and get a raft of bonus material? Or, if you can't spare the cash, why not help us out by sharing an episode with a friend? See you next time.